you guys. Welcome back to Flickers of Fear, my little humble movie review show. Now, it's only a couple of days until Christmas, or at least that's when I'm putting this up, and I already kind of fucked up because remember how I said if you've been watching my other videos for the month of December, I've been trying to do, if not necessarily Christmas-themed movies, at least ones that were set in the wintertime. And I kind of figured out which ones I wanted to do, kind of ahead of time so I could kind of get them all cranked out. And one of the ones that I put on the list ended up being not really a Christmas movie and not even really a winter movie. So... I probably should have switched some around on the schedule like when I found that out, but oh well, because I kind of feel like the one that I did last week, which was Day of the Beast, probably would have been a better one to do like at this time because it's close to Christmas, but whatever, fuck it. It doesn't really matter. Christmas is just only, I'm uploading this on the 23rd or the 22nd if you're a patron of December, but other than that, it doesn't really matter because people will be watching it whatever time of year. Now, the reason that I made that mistake was because the first movie, because this is a sequel, but the first movie called Pooka was actually a Christmas movie, and I think we did a matinee on it last Christmas, Christmas of 2020, so I don't know why, I just assumed that the sequel, Pooka Lives, they both have exclamation points, that's why I'm making that gesture, but I just assumed that would be kind of along the same lines, that it would be a Christmas movie or a winter movie or something like that, and it's not, but I guess I'm going to have to allow it because, one, I watched it and I enjoyed it quite a bit, and two, the first movie is absolutely a Christmas movie, and this has, like, the character kind of carrying over. So, as I mentioned earlier, probably on the Pooka review and on my review of Pilgrim, which came out around Thanksgiving, this is one of Hulu's Into the Dark series, and if you haven't seen those other videos or you don't know what that is, Hulu has teamed with Blumhouse, and they put out it's a series, but they're not like interrelated. They put out a horror movie, a low budget horror movie every month, and it usually has something, whether explicitly or tangentially, to do with the holiday that occurred during that month. So, they've done Thanksgiving ones, they've done Easter ones. Did they do an Easter one? They've done New Year's ones, they've done all to like Valentine's Day. And I believe in 2018 or 2019, was their Christmas entry was Pooka. Now, I really, really liked the first Pooka movie. It was really creepy, it was really well done, and it does seem like that one is a favorite among all of the movies in the Into the Dark series. I haven't seen them all. I've actually only seen a minority of them. I will get around to watching all of them one of these days, but, I have a big long list, as you guys know. And I've heard that some of them were, it's kind of hit and miss because, they're not super high budget, obviously, because they're made for Hulu by Blumhouse. Blumhouse's kind of whole business model is to sort of crank out these lower budget horror films, and it's not saying that they're bad because a lot of them are actually really good, but there's a real quick turnaround time on them, so sometimes you're not going to get these big epic spectacle horror movies. It's just going to be kind of like an indie movie, which is what this one is as well. So the first Pooka introduced the character of Pooka, who was kind of like a stuffed toy, kind of like a creepy, cute teddy bearish type of situation, and he was kind of like Teddy Ruxpin, if you guys remember the 80s, like what that was, where it has like a nice setting and a naughty setting, and if you're nice, it has like, it flashes these blue eyes, like these big, they look kind of like headlights, and but when it gets angry, it kind of repeats back what you say, but like in a devilish kind of voice, and its eyes turn red. Now, this character kind of took off, and I can see why, because it's, actually like pretty cool looking character design. And it kind of took off to the point where I believe, I don't know if it still does, but Naughty Pooka had its own Twitter feed, and I guess like the character of Pooka sort of became an unofficial mascot of the whole Into the Dark series. So as I said, the first Pooka was very well received. Now, the first Pooka movie, if you remember, when we talked about it like last year, I think, and that was much more a psychological horror film in the sense that it concerned a dude who was hired at Christmas time to wear this Pooka suit, because Pooka was kind of like this new toy that had come out and it swept the world and it was super, super famous. So he took a job being in the suit, and it slowly sort of drove him crazy, and or maybe Pooka kind of came to life like as a demonic thing. So much more of a creepy psychological type of thing. Now, this movie, Pooka Lives, it kind of went in a different direction than that, and I'm kind of glad it did, because honestly, it seems to take place in the same universe, but it's not really the same kind of movie at all. In fact, it's kind of more, it has horror elements and it has some creepy scenes in it, but it's kind of more of like a satire or like a black comedy type of thing. And I think that was a good direction to go in. The only thing linking the two is the character of Pooka, and Pooka being this toy that is like massively, massively successful to a point where it's got, you know, TV shows and merch and all this other kind of stuff. So this does play with that. And as I said, this one, interestingly, for an Into the Dark, you know, movie in the series, is it doesn't seem to be based around a particular holiday. I saw a couple of reviewers that said maybe Easter, but even that's like pretty tenuous. I think pretty much the only reason they got away with it was because, one, this is the only sequel so far in the Into the Dark series, which should tell you something, that the first Pooka was so popular that they felt, you know, that they could do a follow-up of it. And the fact that they kind of like invented a holiday for this to go around, which should be like, I think it's International Pooka Day. And I was just kind of like, okay, that's fine. I'll roll with it. So this isn't really Christmas themed or holiday themed in any way whatsoever, but I still had a really good time with it. So, you know, we're going to talk about it. So this one kind of centers around this guy named Derek. Oh, I should mention that this was actually directed by Alejandro Brugues. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that sort of right. Sorry if I'm not. He actually directed Juan of the Dead, which is great if you haven't seen it. And one of the segments, I think it was like the slasher movie segment in Nightmare Cinema, which was also like a really decent anthology film if you want to check that one out. So he's the one that directed this. So the story behind this, there's a guy named Derek who's played by Malcolm Barrett. And he wrote a book about online personalities, and presumably wasn't too flattering about some of them. So he's been living in New York City. He comes from a small town, but he'd been living in New York City, and he wrote this book, and he pissed off this one really, really obnoxious anal wart of a YouTuber. I don't remember if they call him a YouTuber in the movie. Maybe they just say of influencer or whatever. Maybe they can't say YouTube in a movie. I'm not really sure what the copyright is on that. But yeah, so this dude's name is Jax. He's pretty much, you know, like all of those fucking super popular like YouTubers. It's like aimed toward like really younger people or whatever. And I sound like a grandma, but you know what I mean. It's just like he's really obnoxious, like everything's yelling and all this like crazy kind of shit going on. So he's that kind of guy. So he didn't like what Derek said about him in this book. So he decides that he's going to amass his legion of followers, his Jax army, if you will, to essentially ruin the dude's life. And they are pretty successful at doing this in the sense that they get his publisher to not promote his shit anymore, like his book sales tank. You know, every time that he's online, he's just completely inundated with shitty messages telling him to kill himself and stuff like that. Anybody that's been on the internet for any length of time will know what, or will be able to imagine what being a target of this attack would be like. So he's pretty much disgraced. He can't really get another book off the ground because his career is, you know, in the toilet at this point. So he decides that he's going to go back to his hometown, which is a small town named Spring Valley, to see, kind of lick his wounds and see if he can get his shit back together. Just kind of get over this, you know. So essentially, like all of these YouTubers, these irritating YouTubers fans, like drove him out of New York City. So he goes back to the small town. And he gets a job as a copywriter at the company that makes Pooka, that's like responsible for Pooka. Now, he's staying with two friends of his, like childhood friends of his, whose names are Molly and Matt. Now, fans of the new Mystery Science Theater that came out on Netflix and is going to be doing their own thing on their Gizmoplex next year, Matt and Molly, the married couple, are actually played by Jonah Ray and Felicia Day. So I thought that was kind of neat, like to see the two of them in the movie together. I'm not sure. I know that they've done other stuff. You know, I haven't seen it. Like I've seen Felicia Day and a couple other things, but that's mainly where I know them from, is from the new Mystery Science Theater. So I thought that was kind of cool seeing them. So they've kind of stayed in this small town. Matt is sort of like this affable, dad type, but very, very skeptical. Whereas Molly is this very like new agey. She's got crystals all over the house and shit like that. And they also have a daughter. Now, there are also 2 other childhood friends, one of whom is named Susan. And Susan and Derek used to date back in the day, but I guess they broke up because he had big city dreams and she wanted to stay. She liked it where she was. So there was that whole thing. And she also works at the Pooka company because it's this big, I think it's called Spectacular Contraptions Incorporated or something. And I guess I was led to the implication being that this is kind of a small town and this is kind of like the big main company where a lot of people in the town work. So Susan works there as well. And then they also have a friend named Ben or Benny who became a policeman. So he's like the sheriff. And he's like a really cool guy. I kind of wish he had more scenes because he's like super funny. But yeah, so that's kind of like the gang. Now, as it happens, members of Jax's army, one of whom is also this irritatingly young and equally obnoxious dude who's like the social media guy at the Pooka company. He basically tells all of Jax's legions of friends, like he basically doxes him. And he's like, he's back here in Spring Valley. This is where he's living. This is where he works. So, come fuck him up. So he starts getting harassed at his friend Matt and Molly's house, which makes him feel really guilty because he's like, now their house is getting egged and he's having other things happen to him too. Like, he's getting yelled at work because everybody knows about that, knows about what happened. And also his car gets vandalized and shit like that. So they're kind of all sitting around drinking and eating weed brownies one night. And they're trying to figure out, like, what can we do? Like, what can we do to get this Jax douche off your back so you can maybe start writing again or get back into your career, make everybody forget about it? So what he decides to do, he's like, well, basically, we're going to fight fire with fire. What we're going to do is we're going to come up with some stupid internet challenge that will go viral that's about Pooka. That will kind of like take the heat off me a little bit. So that's kind of what they do. So essentially what they do is they write a creepypasta, which they call eerie pasta in this, but I wasn't aware creepypasta was a copyrighted term. Maybe they just wanted to play it safe. I'm not really sure, but they actually call it eerie pasta, but you know what I mean. So they decide that they're going to, do a creepypasta about Pooka and summoning Pooka's creator, whose name was Ellie. Now, I forgot to mention that there's actually a prologue, which stars Will Wheaton, by the way. There's a prologue to this movie, which kind of shows, it's like I said, I guess it's like a little bit of a retcon because I can't remember. It's been like more than a year since, it's been like a year since I saw the first movie. So I can't remember if they said in the first movie, like, who the creator of Pooka was. I remembered in that movie that it was already like this big famous toy, and I don't know if they brought up who created it. But in this movie, they posit that the creator of Pooka was this woman named Ellie who had worked for this company, and they bought the design off her, and then they wanted to change it, and she flipped out because she has this weird kind of connection with Pooka. So she flipped out when they wanted to change it. And she ends up getting into an argument with her husband about it because she gets fired from her job and like dragged out by security. And so she ends up stabbing Will Wheaton to death. Not actual Will Wheaton, but her husband, who's played by Will Wheaton in the movie, and then sets herself and the house on fire. So this had happened like a year prior to the events of this movie. So what they do, the creepypasta they come up with is you have to do this thing where you eat ashes. It's called the Pooka challenge, obviously. You eat ashes to represent, the fire that Ellie had set herself on fire. And also, and she was wearing a Pooka mask when she did it, and it melted to her face. Because actually the guy that's the sheriff, Benny, that's a friend of theirs, shows them the crime scene photos because he was the one that had to go to the scene, right? They're like, why did you have that like queued up on your phone like that? So there's just like these little kind of funny moments like that. So you have to eat ashes, and then you have to do the Pooka song, Pooka see, Pooka do. You have to do that, and then you have to, but with different lyrics, like saying or essentially what you're supposed to be doing. It's kind of like Candyman or Bloody Mary or something like that, where you're summoning Ellie's spirit in the form of Pooka, and she is gonna judge you if you're nice or if you're naughty, and if you're naughty, he's gonna like fuck you up. So they do this. They post this challenge anonymously, obviously, on like a creepypasta type website. And of course, it goes viral. Everybody starts doing it. And then, as they quickly determine, and I think this is in the trailer, which is like, we use the internet. The internet has literally created a monster. So apparently what happens is that because this challenge becomes so widespread, it starts to morph the way a lot of these creepypastas do, whether you're talking about Slender Man or, Momo or whatever. I think they even mentioned Momo in this, actually. Where people start doing their own spins on it. And as they, like, fan art and stories and things like that, so people start adding to the Pooka legend. Oh, now Pooka has claws. Now he's, like, big and out. This one has lederhosen on. This one, like, this one's, like, looks like a big fucking werewolf or a Wendigo or something like that. So as it starts to evolve and morph, they essentially, the internet, the collective belief of it essentially brings it to life in different forms. So that's pretty much like what, I mean, they explain later on, like Molly, the new age chick played by Felicia Day, that they've essentially created a tulpa, like an imaginary friend, but because so many people believed it, they literally like willed it into existence. So that's essentially what this is. So Pooka, as it goes on, Pooka starts looking different in different iterations, and he has like more powers now. Like suddenly he has claws, suddenly he can teleport, suddenly he can do shit that he couldn't do before just because people keep adding on to the story. So obviously the five of them are freaking out because it takes them a long time to figure out what's going on. At first, Susan gets attacked by somebody that just looks like somebody in a Pooka suit, and they kind of think that, oh, it's that douchebag that works where they work that's been harassing Derek. So they just think it's that. And Matt, who's played by Jonah Ray, he really does not believe any of this shit is going on. He just thinks like somebody's doing pranks and all this other kind of shit. But as it goes on, like people start getting accused of like murdering their whole families. Like there's one news story about a guy that murdered his whole family in Germany, and then when they put him in jail, he's like, no, Pooka did it. And of course, like nobody believed it. So they're kind of going the route of, like the Slender Man stabbings, like those two little girls, like in real life that, that stabbed their friend, thankfully not to death, because they said Slender Man told them to. So it's kind of going in that direction. And it's also kind of, the film's not like really heavy handed, but it is kind of like doing a satire of sort of like online negativity, bullying, stuff like that, and also goes into the power of storytelling and how somebody can come up with a fairly innocuous story and have it morphed into ways that they didn't expect, and it kind of gets out of their control as other people get hold of it, and in this case ended up being really negative. So obviously Pooka is going around in different forms, killing people, attacking people, and so they have to find some way to stop it. So they come up with another creepypasta of how to kill Pooka, and it's supposed to happen like on this big International Pooka Day presentation that they're doing and all this other stuff. Now, so I'm not going to spoil it too much because this movie is not that old. I think it just came out in 2020, or I think it was 2020 it came out, so last Christmas. Or last April, actually. Or I can't remember. Maybe it was April 2020. So I don't want to spoil it too much if you want to see it. Like I said, it's on Hulu. It's their Into the Dark series. If you liked the first Pooka, you'll probably like this one as well, but it's a very, very different type of movie. It's kind of more, the first one was kind of more surreal, more psychological type of horror, whereas like one dude is like, is he going crazy or is Pooka really doing this shit? You know what I mean? So that had that whole kind of thing going on. Whereas this one is a lot more satirical, even though it does have a lot of horror elements to it. Now, one complaint that I saw, because it does seem like most people seem to dig this one. I don't know if I liked it as much as the first one, but it's kind of hard to compare them because they're kind of different. They just have a different thrust and like a whole different vibe about them. But I did actually like really enjoy this one a lot. But one criticism that I saw, and this didn't actually bother me, but they said, well, it ended sort of on a cliffhanger, if you want to call it that. At the end, it's kind of like they do what they're supposed to do and like defeat things, but then it looks like shit's about to get like way, way worse. And then it ends. So I don't know if they're actually setting up a third Pooka movie or if they just didn't have the budget to film this big epic thing that they wanted to film, because there is like during the credits, there is like an animated sequence that kind of shows you what happened next. So they did do that, but like I said, it was probably just budget constraints, although it's very, very possible that they could be setting up a third movie because, it would be kind of tailor-made for that. It's, the last scene of the movie, all the stuff that happens, you could totally see another one that goes like much bigger scale. As I said, that didn't bother me that it ended like that, because I was just kind kind of like, oh, okay, fine. You know, if they make another one, fine. If they don't, that's fine too. You know, it was kind of cool that it ended like that. But honestly, like I said, I actually had a really good time with this one. I enjoyed seeing all the different versions of Pooka, like, because that's pretty much exactly what would happen if you put up a creepypasta with a character that really resonated with people, and then people would start doing their own scarier versions of it. And that's essentially what happens here, you know. And also the whole thing about, you know, online toxicity and kind of these, you know, douchebag YouTubers that can, you know, you say something to piss them off and then they have so many fans that they can just like ruin your whole life or like drive you offline or whatever. And so I like that it kind of looked into that. But as I said, it's not real heavy-handed about it. It's actually like pretty funny. And honestly, other than like all the Pooka designs and stuff like that, I really, really liked seeing Jonah Ray and Felicia Day in this. They were really funny. And I just really liked all the interactions between the friends. And it's weird because Derek, who's the main character, and Susan, who's kind of like his on again off, well, his love interest, because they broke up like back in high school or whatever. And then he's trying to get back with her. They were actually kind of boring characters. You know what I mean? As in they were just kind of like regular ass people, whereas Matt and his wife Molly were more kind of like fun sort of characters. And the sheriff Benny, he was also like super funny, you know, with all his stuff about his being a sheriff and like wanted to be like super hot gay guy and all this other kind of stuff. And I thought that was like really funny, like how that interaction. But yeah, this was like a lot of fun. As I said, it's not really a Christmas movie, it's not really a holiday movie. And you don't have to have seen the first Pooka to understand this one, because it doesn't, other than the Pooka character being a big popular toy, it doesn't really have anything to do with the first one. So they both like pretty standalone. But yeah, if you like kind of like horror comedy type stuff, if you like kind of, I don't want to say like Killer Doll, because it's not really like that, because when the Pookas attack, they're kind of life size, you know what I mean? But yeah, I really liked seeing all the different versions of Pooka that came out. And yeah, it was just like it's very, very fun, very, very entertaining. Yes, the ending is a little bit anticlimactic, but I understand they don't have a lot of budget to work with these. And honestly, it's fine. It didn't really bother me that it ended where it ended. You know, if they make another one with like Pookie army, like I said Pookie because that's my cat's name, with Pooka armies or whatever, I think that would like pretty cool. But if they don't, then that's fine too. But yeah, it's on Hulu, part of their Into the Dark series. Let me know if you've seen it and what you thought about it, and I will see you guys on the next Flickers of Fear. Bye.